It's gonna get really annoying that I have to turn my fan off every time I record these videos because it gets really hot in here and we're going into summer and I hate the heat. It is the beginning of May. It is midnight. I am very tired. I also just killed a huge fucking spider. So let's talk about what I read in April. The first book that I read in April was The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I already uploaded a video where I talked about this, so you can go and watch that video if you want to hear all my full thoughts. It was a good book. I liked it. It was a reread. It was actually the first reread of this year, I guess. And I read this book for the first time like 5-6 years ago when I was very young. So it was fun to go back and reread it and see how my opinions changed, even though I couldn't recollect any of the opinions I had the first time I read it because I read it so long ago. And it's very short, so I remembered like virtually nothing about this book. But anyways, I read this book. If you want to know my full thoughts about it, you can go watch that video. It's not that old. The camera quality is awful, but you know, it's fine. But anyways, that's the first book I read this month. I read it on like the very 1st of April. I think I read it in one night on the 1st of April, so cool. Okay, so I think I mentioned in my March wrap-up video, which I uploaded like halfway through April because I like procrastinating. I mentioned that after The Perks of Being a Wallflower, I took like a 2-week break from reading for some reason. And the reason for that is because I mentioned in that video that the last 2 books that I read at the end of March this year were 2 books that involved school shootings, and I didn't like them. I did not like either of these books. They were both not very pleasant reads for me. There was a lot of reasons why I didn't like it, but I had made a plan prior to reading these books that I wanted to read 3 books that involved school shootings in a row, and after the first 2 failed attempts, I was really, really nervous to read this next book, but thankfully it paid off in the end. So I read Every Moment After by Joseph Moldover. I read this book, I think, on like the 15th or the 16th of April, so again, I took a pretty long break. After The Perks of Being a Wallflower, I was like, no more reading for me! I read this book, and I'm really happy that I read this after. You can see the reflection of the camera. Cool. Anyways, I'm really happy that I read this after those 2 monstrosities of books that I did not end up liking. So I read this one and it was really, really good. This book is about 2 boys who experienced a school shooting in their 1st grade class, and this book takes place 11 years later when they are graduating from high school. These 2 boys are named Matt and Cole, and they're best friends. They became closer after the shooting, but they were already friends prior to it. They also lost one of their best friends in this school shooting, and it's kind of like a love story. It's kind of like grappling with stuff that you don't know. It talks about the shooting and but the main focus of the book isn't the shooting. It's really interesting. I can't really fully dissect what the book is about because it's a lot, but I really like this book. I actually read it in one night. I started reading it at like 3 a.m. and I did this thing where I was like, okay, I'm gonna read the first 100 pages, which is what I normally try to do with most books. So I read the first 100 pages, but I was like, man, this book is only 350 pages long. I bet I could get to halfway, which is 175 pages. And then I got there, and I didn't want to put it down, so I was like, okay, I'll read to 250, and then I got there, and I was like, well, I don't want to go to sleep now and wake up the next day, or wake up hours later during the day for just 100 pages, so I just decided to finish reading it. So I started reading this book at 3 a.m. and I finished it at like 10 a.m. Yes, I stayed up all night. Yes, my sleep schedule was fucked. It's fine. But I really like this book. It was definitely an upgrade from the other 2 school shooting books that I read, which again, I did not like. This one is definitely my favorite out of them, which, I mean, I was kind of expecting because I have heard good things about this, but I've also heard good things about the other 2 books that I read, and I ended up not liking them, which kind of sucks. But anyways, so yeah, this is the next book that I read after 2 weeks of not reading and being very nervous going into this book. It was a good payoff, and I'm really glad that I read it. So the next 2 books that I read, I have a bit of a rant for these next 2 books, because I'm going to show you the books first, and then I'm going to tell you what happened. So the 2 books that I read were The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee, and The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy by Mackenzie Lee. These are in a series. This one comes first and this one comes second. These books, the first book is about this boy, man, he's like 18, so technically he's a man, young adult named Monty, and he has a best friend who he's in love with named Percy, and he has a younger sister named Felicity. And he comes from a wealthy family, and this is a historical fiction novel. It takes place in like the 1700s at some point during that time period. And Monty is gay, or, well, he's not gay, he's bi, but it's not like stated on page because words like that didn't exist during that time period, but he's not straight, basically, and his father is very critical of him for him not being straight. So Monty and Percy and Felicity are going on this grand tour of Europe during this like year. They're taking like a whole year trip to like go around Europe and learn the things about Europe, you know, because that's a normal thing people did in the 1700s. Apparently it is. It says at like the end of the book that that was a thing that a lot of like students did. But anyways, they're going on this trip, and before they leave, Monty's father tells him, hey, if you don't sort yourself out, meaning if you don't figure out all this gay shit that's going on by the end of this tour, might as well just not come back. And Monty is like, well, fuck you, Dad, like, he doesn't care. But at the same time, he's also like, well, if I can't go back, then what do I have? So that's what this book is about. It's kind of about him. Monty is a little shit. He's a douchebag, and he is annoying. He's a really annoying protagonist, but the actual story, like what was happening, it was easy to understand, like the actual story of what was going on, because they went on this wild adventure because of some stupid shit that Monty did in the first like 100 pages. They end up going on this whole like roundabout adventure, you know, like as most books do. But by the end of the story, I would say that it was pretty good. It wasn't like a favorite of mine, but I am a sucker for gay people in history, so I think that kind of curbed me a little bit more. The next book is the sequel to that, The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy. This book is about Felicity, who is, as I mentioned, Monty's younger sister, who went on this trip with them. This book takes place approximately a year after the events of The Gentleman's Guide, and it follows Felicity because Felicity is at this point, she's a 16-year-old girl, and she is in love with medicine, and she wants to be a doctor, but because she's a woman in the 1700s in England, she's not allowed to be a doctor. Like, they won't let her become a doctor, they won't let her study or anything like that. And this book kind of follows her as she tries to find a way to get schooling so that she can become a doctor. And again, the same sort of thing, where shit occurs, and they go on this whole, like, trip. And also, pirates. That's a thing. So, I would say that I like this book just a little bit more because, Percy, I fell in love with Percy by, like, the very first scene that he was in, because Percy he's my love now. And after, like, Felicity left England and there was no interactions with Monty and Percy anymore, I kind of I stopped caring. It's not that I didn't care about her story. Actually, I think the story of this one is more interesting. I think it's more timely in, like, what is occurring. I just think it's really, like, what's going on with the doctor stuff and being a woman in the 1700s. Like, I think it's really interesting. But I do think I like this one a little bit more because, again, Percy, love him. Now let's talk about the drama involving these books, because literally, dead ass, right after I finished The Gentleman's Guide, literally, I finished it at night, I finished it at like 5 in the morning, I went to bed. I think I finished this book, and then I started reading the next book. I think I got like 50 pages in, and lo and behold, the next day, I woke up to book Twitter freaking out about Mackenzie Lee, who is the author of these two books. And of course, I'm sitting here like, okay, I mean, book Twitter freaks out about a lot of shit. But the reason they were freaking out is because Mackenzie Lee did a kind of pretty horrible fucking thing. She works for an indie bookstore, and they were doing this kind of like promotion, I guess, where you could get a signed copy of these books, but they were signed by Mackenzie Lee. Which is fine, like, authors signing other people's books is fine, but it wasn't even just that. It was the fact that she was signing on the title page of the book. So, like, here's, like, the front of the book. She was signing on this page, and these books were not hers. She was signing other people's books. specifically, not entirely, but a lot of books that were written by people of color, people that are in the LGBTQ plus community. It's like, you can't sign this blank page there, like you couldn't have signed there. No, she had to sign on the cover page, which is like a really shitty thing to do if it's not your book. Like, sign somewhere else, sign on the back, sign here, like, it's not that difficult. But no, she was signing on that front cover page, which is really gross, really disgusting, the fact that she was doing that. And of course, this occurred right while I was reading this series. Like, I was literally 50 pages into this book, and I was ready to continue, and this happened. And I literally took like a 3-day break from this book because I was contemplating whether or not I wanted to finish it because of this really shitty thing that this author did. But with that being said, let's move on to the next book on this list, because oof, do I have some things to say about this one as well. So the next book on this list is a pretty well-known title. You might have heard of it. Call Me By Your Name by Andre Ackerman. Or as I like to call him, creepy weirdo pedophile man, because this author is, what the fuck? What the fuck? That's literally all I can say. A bit of backstory with this book. This book was recommended to me a long time ago. Back when the movie came out, which I think was in like 2018 or something, I had a friend who recommended I watch the movie, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll totally do that. And then I didn't. And then I was aware that the movie was based after a book, and I like reading the books first. I don't know why, I just do. So I was like, oh, well, I'm gonna read the book first. And this book had been on my TBR for a pretty long time. I was planning on reading it last year, and then there was this quote that I saw by the author. I'll put it here. I'll also put a link to it down in the description. Which, it's gross. It's a really gross thing, the fact that this author said that. Like, it's disgusting. Like, if you just read the quote, you obviously see, it's like, okay. Going along with what this story is about, because if you don't know what Call Me By Your Name is about, it's about this young boy, this 17-year-old boy named Elio, in the 1980s in Italy, at some place in Italy, and he is discovering things about himself, and going through first sexual encounters and experiences with an older man, specifically a man who is 24 years old named Oliver, who was a student of his father, who is a professor at a university. Just talking about the book here, I don't really have any qualms with the book. Like, I think the book is fine. Like, in terms of like what actually occurs, a relationship between a 17-year-old and a 24-year-old, even though it is, yes, it is pedophilia. It's technically pedophilia because Elio is under the age of 18. He's still a minor, so it is technically pedophilia. I can guarantee to you that if this relationship was depicted between an 18-year-old and a 25-year-old, no one would give a shit. No one would bat an eyelash. No one would be freaking out about it. And a lot of people go back and forth about this, like, debate all the time, like, should you support something like this because it does depict pedophilia? In my opinion, I don't have a problem with that sort of thing. I'd also be a huge fucking hypocrite if I had a huge problem with that age gap when my favorite show, Queer as Folk, depicts a relationship between a 17-year-old boy and a 29-year-old man in the first season, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that. And what occurs in that show is kind of the same thing that happens in this book, where the younger one is kind of the one that pursues the older one. So I'd be a huge hypocrite now if I was like, yeah, this story, bad, because it depicts a relationship, when my favorite show depicts that sort of thing, and I don't have a problem with it. But there are other issues with this book. For one of the things is this writing is overwhelmingly pretentious. I can't think of any other word to describe it, and I can read pretentious writing. Technically, my favorite book, I guess you could say, has pretentious writing. But it's kind of there for a reason. I mean, I guess, I don't really know. But the paragraphs in this reminded me of something like Jane Eyre, which in my opinion is not a good thing, because I fucking hated Jane Eyre when I read it. So reading this book and it reminding me of Jane Eyre is a bad thing, because I didn't like Jane Eyre. Because the thing with Jane Eyre that I didn't like, because I read Jane Eyre a few years ago, or I tried to read Jane Eyre a few years ago, is there'd be like characters having a conversation, or something would be going on, something would happen in a scene, and then suddenly like someone would say something, and then there would be like 4 or 5 really long paragraphs talking about something that seems completely unrelated, and then it would just suddenly go back to the conversation as if nothing happened, and I have to go back like 6 pages to try and figure out what the fuck they were talking about. That's what this book did. It had that sort of like, what the hell is going on, and it just really bothered me. There is a part in this book, part 3 I think it is, it's only 20 pages, and I literally skim read like half of that part. I think I skim read like 15 of those pages out of like the 20 that there were, because nothing was happening. Nothing was being said. It was just a whole bunch of nonsense, and I did not care about it. Another thing that I didn't like about this book is characters are conveniently, randomly forgotten about, and then suddenly they're brought up later, and it's like that you were supposed to have like a huge emotional impact with this character, but because they were kind of forgotten about, you don't really care. The prime example of this is Marcia, who is the girl that Elio is kind of romancing, while he's also getting in with this weird sort of relationship with this Oliver. And that's the thing, is for part 3 of this book, Elio and Oliver go away to like Rome or something. They go away for like a weekend trip before Oliver has to go back to the United States. Elio does not tell Marcia that he's going. And it's kind of like she's mentioned a few times like throughout this weekend, but she's just kind of forgotten about. Like, this is a girl, like, I understand that you're 17 years old and your sole focus is on this older man, but I just think it was very shitty of him to do that. And then later on, after he comes back, after Oliver is gone, there's another character named Vamini, and I'll get to her in a second. She mentions that Marcia came over like while he was away, and she came to the realization that Elio didn't love her, and then she's never mentioned again. She doesn't appear in the book again, she's never mentioned, and I'm sitting here like what happened to her? It's not like she just disappeared off the face of the earth, like what the hell? Vamini. I'll get into Vamini here, because Vamini is this little girl who I guess is like a neighbor to Elio's parents' estate, mansion, house thing, wherever the fuck they are. And she's this little girl, and she has this like chronic disease or illness or something like that. She literally says in like the first scene that she's in that she's gonna die soon, which I think is like, okay, cool. Okay, that's random, but okay. She has like this really good friendship with Oliver, who's at this house for 6 weeks. He doesn't tell her that he's going away for this weekend trip. And then at the end of the story, when she comes back, and she appeared a little bit more than Marcia, but at the end of the story, something occurs with this character, and I didn't care. I was like, was I supposed to care? Was this supposed to have any sort of impact on me? Because it didn't, because I kind of forgot that this character existed most of the time. The book is very much focused on the 2 main characters, Elio and Oliver, which is fine, but to randomly bring up these other characters and make it seem like they're important, but not actually put any impact into what's going on with them, any thought process, it just kind of wipes everything clean. Like, I honestly don't care anymore. And like, those are just like the few things with this story. I wasn't really a huge fan of the writing style. Again, I can read pretentious writing, but this was just next level for me. This book is, how long is this book? This book is 248 pages, so other than The Perks of Being a Wallflower, this is the shortest book I've read in a long time, and it was exhausting reading this book. And it wasn't in the sense where, because like there's other books that I read, like Days Without End or whatever, where I'll read the book and after 50 pages I'll get exhausted from reading it, but it's not that I don't want to continue it, it's just that if I continue reading, like, my brain's just gonna pop out of my head. Whereas with this book, I was getting exhausted because I didn't care what was going on. I was falling asleep reading this book. I was tired. I didn't care, which is not a good thing. So, I don't know. I didn't like the book all that much, but just like the thing with the author was just like the nail in the coffin for me. After I saw that quote from the author, because I think I saw it last year, because this book was on my TBR. I was planning on reading it. It was on my TBR, and then I saw that quote, and I was like, okay, guess I'm not reading that. And the only reason I did is because Whenever I tell people that I read LGBTQ plus books, they always ask me, every single person asks me, oh, have you read Call Me By Your Name? And I'm fucking tired of saying no, so finally I can say yes and then move on. This is a book that was actually recommended to me by a friend of mine. This was recommended to me by a lot of people, but a friend of mine from work, she actually lent me this book because I told her I wasn't going to read it, and I showed her the quote and everything, and she said, well, you should still read the book because it's still really good. So shout out to my coworker. If you're watching this, you know who you are, because this is actually her copy of this book. After all this bullshit blows over, I'm gonna give her book back. So the next 4 books that I've read this month, I actually was not planning on reading at all, and 3 of them technically don't count, but I'm counting them anyways because I do what I want. While I was in the midst of reading The Lady's Guide by Mackenzie Lee, that was when, like, all this stuff was going on. When I saw all that stuff on book Twitter, I was like, God, do I want to continue with this book? So I decided to take a break, and I went on Tapas. Or actually, I originally went on Webtoon, which is a comic reading app or website or whatever. And I initially read a comic called Novae by Kaju. I will put a picture of it here. You should read it. It's really, really good. But after I finished reading that, because I read it in one night and I was just sobbing over how good the artwork was, I still didn't really know if I wanted to continue The Lady's Guide. So I was like, man, what else can I read? What else do I want to read? Because this book, or this comic, Novae, I had wanted to read it for a while, but then I was thinking and I was like, Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. That's a thing that I've been planning on reading for a long time, but I've been putting it off for a reason that I'll get into in a second. But because Heartstopper is on Webtoon, I decided to read it. So after I finished Novae, I started reading Heartstopper, and I technically read, even though I did not read the physical versions of this book, I technically read the first 3 volumes and then some of this comic. So this is something that I've been planning on reading for a while. The main reason that I pushed it off is because, number 1, I could not get it at my library system. My county library system, because I have 2, because I'm, just that cool. My county library system doesn't have Heartstopper. They barely have any Alice Oseman books. The only book by Alice Oseman they had up until like 2 months ago was Radio Silence, and then they got Solitaire, but they don't have Heartstopper. And my other library system, my state library system, does have them, but with all this stuff that's going on, all the libraries are closed. I really wanted something light and easy to read, so I decided to read them, and thankfully I really enjoyed them. If you're not sure what Heartstopper is, it is this webcomic that is posted by Alice Oseman. She posts this, I think she posts it 3 times a month. She posts it like every 10 days, and it's on Webtoon and Tapas. I also think she puts it on her Tumblr page, and every now and then, after like each chapter finishes, it is published in an actual like physical book form. But the story is about a character named Charlie who is gay, and I think he's 14 at the beginning of the story, and it is about this character named Charlie who meets another character named Nick, and it kind of tells of their story of how they meet and how they become friends. They start playing on the same sports teams, and they start interacting with each other, and then how they eventually end up in a relationship. And it has a lot of interesting themes with like sexuality, figuring out your sexuality. It's really cute, like romance stuff. Like they're young, they're like 14, 15 years old, so it's like what the 14, 15-year-old kids do in terms of romance, because they can't really like pay for all that much, and they can't really like drive anywhere, so what can they do? But it was still really cute. But it also goes into more serious topics, especially in the later versions. There's also things having to do with like just teenagers dealing with teenager shit, public coming out, being outed. That was a big thing. Sexual assault, kind of. I mean, it's not gone into all that much, but it is there in a few instances. It just deals with a lot of stuff, and I think it's dealt with in a very respectful and very nice way. And also, one thing that I want to say, I don't know if this appears in the physical versions of this book, because I don't know how that would be really possible, But for each update, because it's kind of separated into like pages, Alice Oseman, if there is any possibility of any triggering material in an update, she'll have a little note at the top saying, this chapter might contain triggering material for some people. Scroll down to the update notes if you want an explanation of what's going on. And sometimes there's really serious stuff happening, like then it's simply something as easy as people consume alcohol in this chapter. And sitting here, I'm like, alcohol can be a trigger warning? And yeah, it really can. It can trigger people, and I really like how with every little thing that could possibly trigger someone, she puts a trigger warning there, because I think that's a really nice thing to do, because give trigger warnings, people. It's not that hard. But anyways, I read these 3. Again, I did not read the physical versions because I can't get my hands on them, but I'm still counting it because technically I did read them. And I like them. I actually reread them like 3 times before this video. I think I read them on every single platform and liked them on every single platform because I like them that much. And it's really cute and sweet and easy to get through. I'm actually thinking of changing my phone background to this point in, I think it's in chapter 3, the beginning of chapter 3, when Nick says, I'm honestly having a full-on gay crisis. And I love that. If you go to my Twitter and you look at my header on my profile, I've cropped it where it just says full-on gay crisis because honestly, mood. I love that so much. But it was very great and I really liked reading it. After I finished Heartstopper, I didn't stop there with Alice Oseman's books. I decided to read Solitaire, which is another book that I had been planning on reading. Again, I'll get into when I was planning on reading it in a second, but I decided to read Solitaire because I had a way of getting it from my library. They actually made it as an ebook available through one of my libraries, which was really cool. So I decided to read it, and I didn't like it all that much. So Solitaire is, I guess technically it's Nick and Charlie's origin story, because it's where these 2 characters were first introduced, even though technically Heartstopper occurs first in terms of like the time frame. Okay, so let me explain this. So Solitaire is a book about Tori, who is Charlie's older sister, and she is, I think she's in like technically like her junior year of high school. She's in year 12, so I think in the US equivalent what that would be like junior year. So she's kind of far into school and she's gonna be getting out soon, whatever. And it follows her as she meets other people and becomes friends with other people, and how she and these other people are trying to figure out who these people are called Solitaire that are pranking their school. Technically that is the premise of the book, but it's really not gotten into until like the last half of the book. The first 27 chapters are kind of about Charlie. It's really about Charlie, and it was one of those things where I did not want to read this yet because I knew that Charlie was in this book, and I knew that it took place after Heartstopper, and I'd heard people say that shit goes wrong, and I did not want to be preparing myself for that to happen in Heartstopper because things have been pretty happy and I don't want to destroy it for myself, but I did it anyways. I fucked it up, whatever. The first however many chapters of Solitaire, I think the first 27 chapters, it's about Tori, but it's really about Charlie and Tori helping Charlie and dealing with what Charlie is going through. And then the second half of the book really gets into all this Solitaire stuff. I did not like this book all that much. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever read, but it wasn't the best, especially in terms of Alice Oseman's writing. I just think it was a very lackluster story. I didn't really like it all that much. I did not like the way that it was portrayed or how certain characters were acting, and I don't know, I just didn't really like it all that much. But that does not mean that I hated it. I didn't hate this book, and I really think it was good to go back and read this book because, as I said, I really like Heartstopper, and I've also read Radio Silence, and I really liked Radio Silence, so obviously Alice Oseman's writing has improved. This was her debut novel, which she published, or she wrote when she was 17, and she got it published when she was 19. Now, I'm 19 right now, so the fact that she did that at 19 is fucking insane. So I like have fucking great, like deep respect for her for being able to do that, because literally how the hell? I write one chapter, a simple like 2,000 word chapter, and I'm like, whew, that's enough writing for the month. And this girl is out here just fucking killing it in the game. And also her stories are just really good and they're really relatable. Again, Solitaire wasn't the greatest story, but it was also a debut. She wrote it when she was 17. Give her a break. And it's obviously shown that she's improved. I did mention that these 4 last books I was not planning on reading this month. The main reason for that is because Alice Oseman has a new novel coming out in, I think, July. When does this book come out? Hang on. 9th of July. Yeah. She has a new novel called Loveless, which is coming out in July, the beginning of July. So I thought what I was planning on doing is I was going to read all of Alice Oseman's novels up until that point. I was going to read Heartstopper. I was going to read Radio Silence, or reread Radio Silence. I was going to read Solitaire, and I was going to read I Was Born for This, as well as all of her short stories like Nick and Charlie and This Winter and all that kind of stuff. I was going to read all of those right before Loveless came out so that I could be like in the groove for Alice Oseman, but I decided I was in the groove for Alice Oseman this month, so I decided to read it. I was actually planning on rereading Radio Silence because I just finished like Solitaire and all that kind of stuff. I was like, why don't I reread Radio Silence now? But I think I'm gonna wait until that time period, because I do want to be in preparation. And for the fucking life of me, I cannot get my hands on I Was Born for This. I cannot buy it from my like local bookstores or anything. They don't have it. I can get it from Amazon, but I don't want to get it from Amazon, especially with what's going on right now. I can't get it at my library because all the libraries are closed, and none of them have ebook versions of it, so that's really annoying. But hopefully, when Loveless is coming out, I'll be able to get my hands on I Was Born for This, and I can finally frickin' read it. But that was the reason why I wasn't planning on reading it now. I was actually going to read them all, like, in a row, and possibly make a video about it. Who knows? But that's what I was planning on doing, but I decided to do it now. I mean, who knows? Maybe... And when Loveless does come out, I'm going to reread all of her books, you know, just because her books are great, and they're easy to read, they're easy to get through, and I just think they're really, really good. So, yeah. Those are all the books that I read in the month of April. I mean, technically, I finished Solitaire at the beginning of May. Technically, I finished it on, like, the 1st of May, because, okay, let me tell you. I was planning on finishing this book on the last night of April. I was going to lay down in bed because I was reading on my Kindle. I was going to lay down in bed and I was going to read it, but the second my head hit the pillow, I was out. So I didn't end up finishing it until like 9 a.m. the next morning. But I still count it because I tried, okay? I was really going to do it, and then it didn't happen. I read 9 books this month. I'm really proud of that because going into this month, having only read 1 book up until the middle of this month, I was like, I'm gonna get fucking nothing done, especially with all the stuff's going on, and like it's the end of the semester and a bunch of grades and all that kind of bullshit is happening. But I read 9 books this month. I'm really proud of that. I'm almost back up to where I'm supposed to be with my reading goal. Technically, at this point in the year, I should have read 32 books, and I have read 31. So I'm really close. Like, I'm getting there. So hopefully I'll be able to reach my reading goal at the end of the year. But anyways, this upcoming month, I have a lot of exciting stuff planned. One of them you can kind of see up there. I'm planning on reading a bunch of stuff this month. There are some books that just came out that I'm really, really, really excited to read. I'm also going to be tackling a very, very well-known series that everyone has heard of and everyone has read, and I haven't, and people are still mad at me about that, so I'm just gonna finally fucking read it. I'm gonna tackle that in this month, so stay tuned if you want to see what it is. I'm sure you can guess, it's not that difficult. If you liked this video, be sure to let me know. Let me know if you've read any of these books. I will leave all links to Goodreads descriptions and all that fun stuff down in the description, as well as the link to that quote by the author of Call Me By Your Name, because it's a mess. I'm also thinking I'm going to put in some links to the pictures of examples of what the author of The Gentleman's Guide and The Lady's Guide did, because some people might not know what I'm talking about because not everyone is involved in book Twitter, which is fine. But I think I'm going to put some links to that down in the description too. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm recording this at night as I keep doing, because I actually tried to record this video yesterday and I tried to record it during the day and I looked like a fucking vampire. So I think I'm gonna stick with the night recording, just hopefully you can hear like stuff in the background. My mom's watching TV downstairs. I'm getting really hot. My fan's been off for a while. I'm also wearing a black t-shirt and it's getting really hot because it's going into summer. But anyways, I will see you in the next video. I hope you liked this one. I'm repeating myself. Okay, bye. See you guys later.